Welcome to Spirituelle Sunday with me, Lee Marie Jacobs. This live broadcast is the go-to live show for holistic longevity for women. Each week, I share stories, interviews, strategies, and simple actions to support your greatest legacy. To find out more about the leading community for holistic longevity for women and to join Spirituelle, visit spirituellesociety.com. I also invite you to subscribe on YouTube to get reminders about our weekly show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirituelle Sunday. As many of you know who have been tuning in every Sunday at 7, I just have very much felt called to interview some of my favorite women in the wellness industry, women in the spiritual industry that have really had a significant impact on my own journey. And it's funny because naturally and authentically, I feel like my friend was like, did you notice that so many of them are Virgos? So I feel like, there's something in the soul that's pulling in some beautiful Virgos. And today, my very special guest is Kino MacGregor. Welcome, Kino.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know your schedule is pretty packed, and so just carving in a little window for us today, I just am so filled with gratitude. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, well, obviously you've had such an impact on my journey as a yoga student, as a yoga teacher, and really drawn to the Ashtanga world. I just remember what I loved instantly about you was that even though the practice can be advanced and can look a little bit challenging, you have an energy and an aura that makes it just filled with joy and grace that you just kind of feel like you can do all the poses when you watch. And I know that that's been part of your journey, is just making it accessible to people that maybe do have injuries, or they might not feel like they're super flexible. And I'd love for you to just share with anyone who's being introduced to your work, maybe for the first time or within the last year, how did you kind of get here to just traveling the globe, sharing yoga and sharing Ashtanga and being such a pillar of leadership for people?
Oh, thank you so much. It's so inspiring for me to hear what a positive impact that I've had on your spiritual journey. That really means a lot for me. I think that reflection is really important to acknowledge and to really take in. So thank you for that. And when I reflect on the whole journey, it feels like I've lived kind of multiple lives along the way. And I can really say that my interest in yoga came from a sincere desire to discover tools to live a more peaceful life. And it was really this sincere quest of understanding, where does peace really come from? How can I find those tools? And with a recognition that whatever path I was on wasn't leading me naturally to find those tools. So it was to yoga that I turned when that sort of yearning rose up within me. And I started dabbling in yoga for a little bit, but when I did my very first Ashtanga yoga class, less than a year after that first class, I was in India, in the small South Indian city of Mysore, meeting my teachers. And I had the grace and good fortune to practice with them for 25 years until my first teacher, Patabi Joyce, passed away. And now Sharat Joyce, who was his grandson, recently passed away. So I felt that I had this amazing opportunity to spend 25 years immersed in the practice. To be honest with you, I never wanted to, nor did I think I would be a yoga teacher. But I had other ideas of kind of the direction that I thought maybe my life would take. And instead, when I came back from India for the first time, people started asking me to teach. And then when I kept going back to India and I kept immersing myself in the practice, there were so many people that asked me to either teach where I was living at the time. I'm from Miami. I was back in Miami at my parents' house, and people were asking me to teach around this city. And then it started to happen that people would meet me in certain places and say, oh, I really like the way that you show up in the practice. Could you come to my yoga studio? In the first place I got invited to was Ireland, which is a country I really, really love. And and share your teaching techniques with my student base here. And I said, yeah, absolutely. That sounds wonderful. And so that's how I started teaching, and traveling and teaching was really through invitation. It wasn't really through intention. And then, meaning I didn't wake up one morning and say, now I'm going to be a yoga teacher and I'm going to hash a plan to, travel around the world. I love travel and I love the practice, but it was really something that people, you could say even the universe, was placing in front of me. And at some moment, I really remember that I had to say yes to it. And there was a moment that I said, okay, yes, I will teach. I will create a website. I will, try to formalize some of these things that have just been happening here and there. And that was a really important turning point in my own journey to really owning the mantle of being a teacher. And from there, it's really evolved into how to spread the practice of yoga to as many people as possible. So that's where the intersection of accessibility comes in. My teachers were always very excited when there were lots of people. And as the yoga reaches more and more people, one of the things that is extremely important to me is to removing access points, whether that means that you feel intimidated by the poses. So how can we make the poses less intimidating? Whether it's a financial barrier, whether it's a geographic barrier. So this is why I have classes online. This is why I travel. This is why I really want to help people understand that it's not, a gymnastic performance, that it's not an aesthetic performance, that, these poses have real magic and power within the spiritual journey, and that anybody who wants to practice them, the teacher, if they're qualified and trained, they can find a way to make those poses accessible for anyone that's genuinely interested in the spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I know for me, like, I remember listening to you once say that in the beginning, like, you didn't necessarily consider yourself super flexible or, a gymnast. And then you rose through these different series of Ashtanga. Like, did you know you had such ability physically, or was that sort of just discovered as well as you practiced?
Yeah, I had no idea really. I was never a dancer, never a gymnast. I never had any prior physical training before I stepped into the yoga room. Then I stepped into the yoga room, and there were some things that I could do because I'm part Japanese and I grew up sitting on the floor. So like sitting on the floor was really comfortable for me because this is essentially how I grew up. Every family meal we were seated on the floor as I was growing up. So there was some natural comfort with some seated poses, and definitely anything involving, external rotation, sitting on the floor, like lotus position, something like that was almost already there merely because of the culture that I was raised in. However, the first time I tried to do a back bend or put my leg behind the head or do a forward bend, it's absolutely impossible. And let's forget all of the strength work. I couldn't do a push up. I couldn't do a balancing pose. I couldn't go upside down or anything like that. So it's really my teachers who kept on encouraging me to try and would give me assistance where I needed the help. And it's really them who believed in me more than I believed in myself. I didn't have this image of myself as someone with a high level of physical aptitude, but yet the yoga practice spoke to a mind-body connection that I hadn't experienced anywhere else in my life. And I can look back now and I can see that it's that, really unique intersection when mind, body, and breath kind of come into alignment that helps us feel kind of in tune with ourselves, in tune with our purpose, in tune with the universe, our highest potential. It all seems, right there at our fingertips, regardless of what material thing is happening in the world. It's like that moment is just so timeless, and it's almost a portal into a promise of a different way of being. And so that's the thing that drew me into more practice. That's the thing that drew me into trying all these difficult asanas in the practice that were just really, really impossible, because it wasn't about the asana, but it was about that moment of kind of breath, body, mind unity, and the potential that unique intersection of presence really afforded me, and really anyone who steps on the mat.
I love that so much. And I do feel like when it's a practice, I always found my teachers in yoga when I was first starting, there was just something about their aura that was very radiant, and it wasn't necessarily physical. And I think it is what you just said. It's when you have that those pillars really solid, you just have a glow about you that's from the inside. You can't really get that same type of radiance, I don't think, from like the cardio workout, because it's such a practice. Did you find your discipline had to really grow? Or again, because a lot of people have this assumption that, oh my goodness, to have an Ashtanga practice, you got to wake up at 4, and people have heard all kinds of things. So for people that are maybe intrigued by the Ashtanga practice, and they might be like, they've heard things like you have to wake up at 4 and you have to be super flexible. And it's like, can you maybe shed light on somebody who is drawn to, you know what, I think that I'm intrigued to maybe practice or learn more about Ashtanga? What are some of the things that you did in the beginning that kind of set your rhythm up well for the practice?
So one thing that is very important to think about is that, no yoga is it means no yoga. So little yoga is better than no yoga. So that means that, yes, although the ideal may be something high and intimidating, maybe even unattainable, maybe something like, oh, wow, it's something that you have to practice, 6 days a week and very, very early. And so there's this intimidation idea of, well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to do that. So I just won't do it. And so what my teacher always said is that whatever little bit you can do that. Whatever little bit that you can do, just do that. So you don't need to do, 2 hours of yoga every day before the sunrise. If you can do even 5 minutes a day at whatever time it works for you, that's enough to get started. And I feel like that creates this ritual of consistency that means that we can start to carve out time for that. And if we can do that, then I feel it's a way for us to, really make a statement for ourselves and kind of say, okay, I'm worth these 5 minutes. So let me claim these 5 minutes just for me, just for my sense of attunement, just for my sense of well-being. And then see what happens from there. There suddenly may feel like, okay, I can do more. Naturally, I'm drawn to it. The idea with yoga is that we shouldn't take it on, in any spiritual practice, I feel, we shouldn't take it on like a punishment or like something that we have to do in order to earn our worthiness. There should be kind of a natural reward cycle where we do it, we carve out those 5 minutes, we feel really good, we're drawn into it again. There's a feedback loop. We have more goodness that comes. So naturally we do it again. It's just a natural kind of gravitation towards what brings us more and more into the presence of ourselves, our spiritual connection. And if we follow it like that, then I feel that discipline is something that creates a structure, but it's really our intention and our energy and the joy that the practice brings to us that naturally makes us keep wanting to do it more and more. Because without that, then discipline can be really rigid, intimidating, cold, and sometimes even punitive. And when people start feeling kind of guilt around their spiritual practices, then the first thing to acknowledge is that guilt usually comes from a seed of sincerity of wanting to do better and be better. And if we're doing our spiritual practice with that guidance from a really qualified teacher and someone who's further along the path, we can soften the edges of that guilt and turn it into coming back to what brings us joy and what brings us wholeness, and then letting that fulfillment kind of pull us back onto the mat, until it begins to be so integrated into who we are that we're not using a lot of energy to force ourselves into that practice. It's just like, well, this is what I do every day. I brush my teeth and then I do my practice, and that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, I love that. I had a couple of years where having a consistent practice was challenging. And I actually had found your YouTube of I think it was like primary series. And I started by just doing the first 10 minutes. And then there was
that.
in that. So that's how I found Own Stars, because I was like, oh, I gotta get rid of these commercials. So I had found Own Stars that way. But for anyone listening who's like, if you want to set a rhythm of just that next level of well-being and inner peace, it's like, I love what you said. It doesn't have to be like a 90-minute practice every single day of the week. I just started by, I just did the first like 7 to 10 minutes and I felt complete.
Yeah.
And then you go on and you get further. My next question is for the studio owners, the yoga teachers, because
Mhm.
this is a common thing. You probably hear it too. They own their studio or they're teaching all the time, and their practice and their own well being takes a back seat, or they're trying
Mhm.
too much teaching. I feel like I look to you to, I mean, your schedule and holding space for so many people. Like, how do you keep your own practice? I don't want to use the word regimented, but you know what I mean? Still not,
Regular, yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things. So, first of all, I have, as I mentioned before, had this amazing kind of sacred refuge space that I could go back to. So, I would carve out time to continue to be a student. So, I would go back to India and spend 1 month, sometimes 6 months with my teacher. And that's made a really, really big difference. If I felt burnt out, I was like, oh, I need to go be a student. So, let me go recharge and then I could come back. So, that's something I'm sitting with right now as my teachers are now passed about where I'm going to find studentship again and refuge. And that's one of the things about finding a teacher on the spiritual path is that we take refuge and it creates kind of a sanctuary for us to just let go and be. And
Mhm.
I'm really still in the process space of where I can find that again. And there's grief and loss around not having that reliably there. And also being, being without that for the first time since I've stepped onto the path. So there's a lot of uncertainty and question around that. And I know the practicality of prioritizing my own practice. So this is something that I have had to make a conscious decision of almost if almost scheduling it in. For example, if I'm leading a retreat and then I know I have to teach from this time to this time, and then there's a short break and this time to this time, and then I'll look at the schedule and say, well, where's my practice time? Okay, my practice time is in the morning. So let me make sure I get that done. What time do I have to go to bed so that I can get up in the morning and get my practice done? And what am I eating? Because eating is an important part of finding nourishment when you're teaching and giving a lot. So if I'm going through an intensive period, I actually make a schedule. And I think that's really important to prioritize that because things don't take care of themselves. It's like it would be really nice if, for example, the laundry would do itself and the dishes would clean themselves. And then the house would also clean itself. And then the practice would also do itself. But the reality is that we have to have some touch points and some structure if we're going to be really, really busy. So if I'm going into a period of intensive teaching, the whole experience is like, this is my practice time. This is my teaching time. This is what I'm going to be eating when I'm going to be eating it. And like do go through intensive periods like that. Now after that, I also think it's important to kind of schedule in unstructured time when
Mhm.
I don't have that, when it's like, okay, I can sleep in and I can practice late and I can
Mhm.
eat a little too late and things that I wouldn't normally eat if I'm going to be teaching because that might impact my ability to hold space. So maybe there's some extra fried foods or maybe there's some extra desserts or something like that.
Yes.
So I think that's important to have that balance. And if we're finding that we're leaning, or for me, if I'm leaning too much on one or the other, meaning there's too much structure or there's too little structure, then that has always been an important time for me to go back and visit my teachers. And so anybody who has a teacher, I would just say to prioritize scheduling in time to go and be with them if you can once a year, once every 2 years, or do online check-ins. You mentioned my online channel, Om Stars. So we created this kind of virtual community so that people could have support and a community check-in and the feeling of kind of having some guidance, even if it's remotely. And I think that's important too. And it's also really important to be in a communal space and get the group energy and have your teacher look at you, in real life and just kind of see like how that goes. So that's something that if everybody can make time for whatever nourishes what if we can all make time for whatever nourishes ourselves, then I think we can fill our own cups over and over again. When you're a busy entrepreneur and you're just trying to hustle and make it as a yoga teacher, it's very difficult to actually understand that prioritizing your personal self-care routines is the very foundation of your success as a spiritual entrepreneur. And without that, we won't be able to have the kind of the to hold the kind of space that we'll need in order to actually do the job well. And that's something that can perhaps normalize the necessity of creating those rituals of self-care, whether it's getting a massage or going to the acupuncturist or going on a retreat and immersing ourselves in being a student or scheduling in sort of mini self-care routines as part of every day. particularly if we're a spiritual entrepreneur, that needs to be part of the business plan. Otherwise, the business will kind of run dry because it won't have the sort of baseline spiritual fuel that it needs in order to actually provide the value that it's providing in the world. So it's like the core ingredient, really, of a spiritual business is that there's some kind of a vibrational grounding in the value that it's offering, the space that it's holding for people to come in and actually find that sanctuary.
Yeah. I feel too sometimes as teachers, we feel this sense of we always have to be, I don't want to use the word perfect, but like together and strong, and we got to show up. And sometimes you have that intuitive, like you need a break, you need a rest, you need to
Yeah.
retreat for a little while. But there's a guilt sometimes as a teacher, or for some of them, it's their income.
Mhm.
So they are a little bit in a struggle of my intuition is telling me to be the student for a little while, but I got to
Mhm.
go. So I feel like
Absolutely.
teachers, it like this is why I think you're such a beautiful you embody the teacher in yoga because you keep your practice. You always are in a state of radiance, and I'm sure you maybe don't feel like that every single day of the year. However, I can, embodying the message, or if we know we're not embodying it because we need a break, I think that that's part of being a teacher too.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other thing I just wanted to mention is for anyone during the COVID years when studios shut down, I did a lot of your online work through OwnStars, and I had your little practice cards.
Oh.
Like I love them so much because I had kids and I was at home and they were homeschooling. So your cards were just, it kept my life and my yoga practice simple. And
Nice.
sometimes you don't need the perfect studio 20 minutes from your house. You can just make it a practice. But for those of us who do love practicing with teachers in person as well, can you maybe share some of the amazing things that you guys have in different areas of the world coming up over the next 12 months that we can learn
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, my husband and I were based here in Miami, and we're going to be offering sort of a more dedicated practice time here in Miami. So, we're going to be offering a winter and a summer, what we're calling Mysore season. So, we'll hold space for the traditional and classical Ashtanga yoga practice in for about a month in the winter season and the summer season. And then next year, it's going to be January and June. And then there are also opportunity to just do the morning practice and then move on with your day, or to have a full immersive experience. And you could join for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the whole week or the whole month. We're also consistently teaching in Bali for 2 weeks in almost every March. And so we'll be doing that next year also in Bali. Is a really wonderful kind of pilgrimage journey. It's such an amazing, powerful island, a kind of vibrational center that's just just so nourishing and so inspiring, and the food is amazing there. It's one of our favorite places in the world. And then we go to Europe in the summer. My husband's from Denmark, and so we kind of visit family and teach around Europe. And we'll be teaching in Greece together next year, and then I'll also be leading my yearly summer retreat in Norway, which is again one of my just most favorite nature spots in the whole world. There's just such powerful energy in the mountains of Norway. And then my husband and I, we travel and teach all over. So we might be coming to a city near you, whether it's Shanghai, Cairo, or New York. It's likely that you might find us somewhere nearby at some moments. You can always check our schedules online or follow me on Instagram. And I'm usually posting where I am, whether it's in stories or in an upcoming post or something like that. And my yoga practice when I first started was this mix of practicing on my own and then saving money when money was really tight to go back to India and practice with my teachers. And I remember it was very important for me to have a financial goal when I was running around and hustling. So, for example, if I knew, well, the ticket is about this much, and I want to be in India for how many months? How much money do I need per month to live in India and pay the shala fees and go there? And then how much money do I need to pay my bills back at home? And if I could come up with a dollar amount that I was saving, that really helped me be able to actually meet that goal. If it's just a nebulous kind of like, I want to go to Bali and practice yoga, but I don't have the money, then we end up kind of beating that drum. But if it's and we get stuck there. But if it's very concrete, I want to save $4,000 to do a trip. Then we can just chip away at that. And then again, it begins to be a positive feedback. Look, I've saved $500. I'm, this percentage there. Look, I've saved $1,000. I'm 25% there. Wow, that's great. And then this is also, it creates meaning. And so I remember, when I had saved up the money for my first trip to India and I bought the ticket, it was like, this was the entire amount that I've ever saved in my entire life. And I spent it all to go to India for 2 months. And there was something like this investment in myself, and I want to acknowledge that this requires, that I see that also when someone comes to practice with me. I recognize that people have planned and saved and then taken the time out of their busy lives, and then they show up for that immersive experience. And I think that that's important, that it's a sort of two-way acknowledgement. First, we have to acknowledge that for ourselves and then carve the time out. And then once we go there, then, okay, there's something about that makes it almost more special, because it wasn't easy to get there. It wasn't free. It took, like, the airplane. We needed to book the airplane. We needed to go on the airplane. We needed to do all of the things to sort of to cross the hurdle so that we could carve out that time for our spiritual practice.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll make sure we put all the links below, but your studio in Miami Life Center,
Yes.
For any of you who want to practice with not only Kino and Tim, but any of their beautiful teachers, ownstars.com, and then also for your books and your cards that I love. And all the events, you can also go to kinoyoga.com.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for this time. Thank you so much. For anyone who's like curious about looking into Ashtanga yoga teacher training, you probably get this all the time because it is a little bit of a time of change.
Yeah.
Is it currently still a process of going to India to be certified?
Yeah. So there's sort of an unknown question right now. And right now in Mysore, where my teacher, Sharaji, his yoga center, they're having a tribute season where they're not doing any authorizations or certifications. So no one knows what they're going to do in the future. So anyone interested in that particular route should check in with them. His mother, Saraswati, is still teaching, and she does authorize and certify people. Going forward in the future, something I think that is very important is the teacher-student relationship. So that something I'm sitting with is just this question of how to support the next generation of Ashtanga teachers. What that looks like is not really clear, but this is something that I'm sitting with and really thinking about, not only for me, but for everyone who had the opportunity to practice with Sharaji and his grandfather, Patabi Joyce, is this question of how is it that the next generation of teachers can be supported, grown, and really given the space to go through their process and their own spiritual journey. So what that looks like is kind of, a work in progress, a question mark, really. And one of the things that is perhaps most important is building that long-term relationship with the teacher that you trust and can guide you along the journey, and letting that sort of be the pull, the magnetic pull. Because anyway, there are some amazing teachers that never had the formal authorization or certification, and they really have done amazing things in the world. For example, David Swenson, who's an amazing light in the Ashtanga yoga path. He was never authorized or certified, and he's been so influential and holds the space of the lineage so powerfully. So for anyone wanting to be a teacher, whether it's Ashtanga yoga or really any other style of yoga, the best advice that I can have is to not focus on any papers, but instead to really get grounded in your journey and to go deeper and deeper and deeper into studentship, and then wait for that message from the universe where people start asking you to teach. And so this, I think, is important, that if you start thinking about yoga as a career path before yoga is grounded within you, then no piece of paper will actually make that valid. Instead, if yoga is grounded within you, naturally that light will attract other people towards you, and then it will start to flow in whatever sort of capacity it's meant to flow. And then at that moment, it's up to us as who carry on the mantle of teachers to kind of respect and honor the flow of whatever light of yoga is kind of present within our practice and within our teaching as best we can.
I love that. And I know for me, it's been so instrumental to have OwnStars available, because I always tend to live remote. healers rarely, and I have my own practice, but sometimes it's nice to just have community, even if it is virtual, and then layer that on with in-person retreats or visits as you travel. So
absolutely.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I know you're traveling, but we're so grateful for you and all the work you do in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you could sit down with a private spiritual teacher and ask, what is my soul here to do? This is the book that answers this for you. First Steps to Destiny, Your Soul Map Revealed by Kathy Roseborough is a powerful 64-page PDF that gives you the actual map to your soul destiny. You'll learn the difference between your personality and your true soul path, set clear spiritual goals, and begin with 4 guided healing meditations, exercises, and teachings drawn from over 30 years of Kathy's work. This is your healthy, grounded start to a lifelong spiritual journey. To begin, just go to kathyroseborough.com and purchase First Steps to Destiny. You can also check out our comments below wherever you're watching this video today, and you can be directed directly to access First Steps to